Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a book called Impractical Uses of Cake. This is the Epigram Books Fiction Prize winner for 2018, written by Yo Joanne. So to give you just a little bit of a summary of the main characters in this book, we're basically following this literature teacher. His name is Sukin Dillon, and he's 35 years old. And you feel right from the beginning of the book that he is stuck in a rut. He is very wedded to his routine. He perhaps doesn't love his chosen profession of being a literature teacher, and something is a bit off. He doesn't feel fulfilled. Then as the plot progresses, he runs into an old schoolmate of his from his own junior college or secondary school days. Her name is Jin, and she's actually unhoused or homeless, living in a cardboard box in Chinatown. And then it's revealed that obviously he has very deep feelings for her. I think they dated in high school, and he basically has his life turned upside down because he is captivated by her and wants to continue talking to her and kind of form some sort of relationship. But he also doesn't understand what went wrong, why she's homeless, and he doesn't want to probe too much. And so he's kind of left in the dark for a lot of the book until the very end as to understanding why she's in this situation. There are a couple of themes that I did enjoy about this book, and they tie into the writing style a little bit. I do think Yo has a very nice writing style. It's very confident, and it describes Singapore in a way that's not overly stereotypical, but still kind of has some nice flourishes and is a very easy to read kind of writing style. And one of the themes I did like was how stuck Sukin feels. He is not one to change his routine, and he is very much like a lovable but frustrating character. And I liked the theme of him feeling a little bit out of place and uncertain in his life and trying to figure out what motivates him and if he's only made certain decisions in his life as a reaction to his parents or because he's being stubborn, not because he's actually tried to pursue what he loves or what he wants to do. I think he really represents feeling kind of stuck in your life and not being able to truly self-actualize or pursue the life that you want because you're not really sure what that even is. And his ability to just latch on to Jin as someone who reminds him of a time when he did have meaning, in essence, this love that he had for her, or this teenage adolescent love, really contrasts with how he's just going through the motions in his current life. And then I think the theme around Jin is pretty interesting as well. She basically just wants to check out, and in secondary school seems to be very vocal, outspoken, and frustrated with the frictions of life. But then something happens where she, I guess, kind of loses her mind, and she really just wants to check out from everything. And she almost feels like living this life without an identity, without being tied to her family or to a home, is more palatable and less full of cognitive dissonance than it is to exist in society. So I think that's an interesting theme. I mean, I do feel like we all at some point want to just check out from society. But if I dig deeper past those two kind of characterizations that both Sukin and Jin represent, overall, I didn't really find this novel that satisfying, mostly because I feel like the impracticality of what was happening and how it wasn't really realistic was too much of a hurdle for me to get over. It was too frustrating. So the idea is that Jin wants to have gone missing long enough that she'll be declared dead. And so there's a whole host of unrealistic things around her that really kind of obstructed me from being able to take away a broader meaning from the novel. I mean, I just think it's impossible to live in Singapore without some kind of identity. And I know there are undocumented people living in Singapore, but just the idea that her family would never see her or like run into her or figure out that she exists, especially because by the end of the novel she agrees to kind of live with Sukin. So I'm like, is he never going to mention her to his parents? Like, it just seems totally implausible that she will just disappear and that that's a viable solution for her. I mean, I know that she kind of went crazy and she wants to check out of society, but I just don't think that's realistic in Singapore. Maybe like in Canada, you can escape to nature or the wilderness, but here I don't really know that it works as kind of like a delusional fantasy. I also feel like their relationship was not very realistic. So basically, they were high school lovers, but then lost contact. And I feel like the humanness of growing up and facing difficulties as an adult was portrayed really well in the book. But them coming back together, I was a bit confused whether it was a romantic relationship or just a deep personal relationship. And I'm not someone who thinks that love conquers all or that it needed to be a romantic relationship, but I feel like Yo also wasn't very clear in what she was trying to depict in terms of their relationship. They obviously have a strong bond, and I do think there's elements of adolescence and just deep adolescence connection that informs their relationship, but them getting back together just seemed really impractical and unrealistic, and I just didn't see how that was going to work if she's also trying to remain like unidentified by the state. On the positive side, I do feel like Yo spent a lot of time with these characters, and really I could feel the humanity of them, and I could feel like the tenderness with which she depicted the characters on the page. I do feel like the plot was tantalizingly slow at some points, and you don't really get a very satisfying explanation for why Jin is in the circumstances that she's in, or kind of what's happening between Sukin and Jin by the end. And I also do feel like the topic of Jin's unhoused state was a bit superficial. I don't know if Yo was trying to have some sort of perspective. I mean, I guess she was portraying it, so like she's letting people know that people do live in that state. Like there are encampments in East Coast Park, there are unhoused people. I read this book called Homeless by Liana Demira, which I thought was fantastic in kind of portraying that experience of what it's like to be homeless in Singapore, and the fact that homeless people do exist and why that happens and why it's systemic. And that's a memoir, or I guess it's more of an autobiography. But that to me felt a lot more educational and informative to the homeless experience than anything that is in this book. This is kind of just, I feel like, a plot device, or like an interesting thing that would to include in your novel. I think it's more used in a literary sense of like disappearing from the world and from society than really commenting about the state of like unhoused people in Singapore in any sense, which is fine. Like I don't think that that was necessarily an objective of hers, but it kind of felt like jammed in there and a little bit not fully thought out, like just superficially treated, I think. Especially because Jin seems to have come from this perspective of wanting to be homeless as like a privilege, like as a way to just escape it all, not because she wants to like live without possessions and without money, not because she has to. So it's kind of odd to think about when it's portrayed like that. Maybe my last little nitpick that I will include is the beginning of each chapter has like an italicized page of a different scene. And once you finish the whole book, you understand what's happening in each of these scenes. But as you're reading, you have no idea what's happening. And I don't know if I'm a fan. It feels very forced. And I don't like being confused as a reader. I'm fine with trying to piece things together, or for there to be tension or things withheld. But just plopping in random, I don't know. Now that I've been reading so much, it just really feels gimmicky. Like we don't need all these like interludes and different perspectives. Like it should just interweave into your plot naturally. I don't know. That's just kind of a taste thing that I've developed now that I've read a lot of fiction. So overall, I think it's not a long read. So if you're interested, if the premise is interesting to you, I do really prefer the depiction of Sukin as the main character over Jin. I think Sukin as kind of like a grumpy 35-year-old literature teacher, like all of his interactions with this one colleague friend that he has, and his views about like grading papers and trying to teach fiction to Singaporean teenagers was very spot on and entertaining to read. And there is a lot of interesting poetry and Singaporean. I think there's a poem by Alfian Sa'at. Definitely Alfian Sa'at's Merlion poem is included, but I think Alfian Sa'at even wrote a poem for this novel, which is, Alfian Sa'at is like one of the best playwrights in Singapore today, and also a poet. So that was kind of cool. And definitely that depiction of Sukin, the literature professor, I think was the more entertaining part of this book. So I think I'll give this like a standard 3 out of 5. It's not terrible, but not super compelling. Just kind of light reading, maybe before bed. I do think the plot is like enough to keep your attention, but it didn't feel fully satisfactory to me, I have to say. Thanks, guys, so much for watching another book review from your girl, Lillian. I am really making progress through pretty much all of the Singapore fiction that is available in the library. So eventually I will conclude this series, but I still have a handful of Singlit or Singapore literature to review. And then I think after that, I will shift to having more comprehensive programming. But I'm really doing a deep dive into Singapore literature for now. And I will provide some reviews, I think, like some overviews. I think I'll do a video of like my favorite Singaporean authors, my top 3 Singlit picks, stuff like that. And I've been reading all of the Epigram Books Fiction Prize winners, which are for unpublished manuscripts. So you have to keep that in mind. Like they are mostly debut novels, and they aren't necessarily going to be like the most polished. So it's kind of cool to have that perspective into all of this kind of more new or like more raw writing. So obviously everything I say is like with a grain of salt. Like I couldn't write a novel myself. Maybe I should try. But I will be following up with some videos that kind of give more overviews. But thanks for watching if you made it this far, and I'll see you in the next one.